The Prime Minister can't rule out that the Voice has a de facto veto role on, for example, our national days of commemoration, such as Australia Day or Anzac Day.
That was a lie.
Facts are important, so here are the facts, because facts are important.
You're damn right.
The Voice clearly has no power of veto. That's at paragraph 17.
The straw man argument about a veto, for example, is one of the straw man arguments. And as you just said, we've been talking a little bit about political risk. So I wanted to give all of you, and we might start with you, Justice Hayne, the opportunity to respond to some of the suggestions. Quite frankly, I think they're absurd. But anyway, we've heard about the Voice somehow being able to exercise power or influence over the Governor-General or the Reserve Bank. And, you know, even just today, I read an assertion from a member of the Parliament that says, and I quote, "You can't rule out the Voice having a de facto veto role on national days of commemoration." Is there any, in the way the proposed Section 129 is drafted, suggestion that any of that could or would occur?
I cannot see anything in the proposed draft that comes anywhere near providing anything like a veto. Short answer to your question is no, veto is not available. As to whom representations can be made, you come back to the kind of issue that Brett Walker was talking about, where people are trying to define some sharp line of the boundary of the scope of the power. Those are attempts that will always fail. We need instead to come back to the points which I think everybody else has made about politics and legality, and the fact that the Voice will not waste its social or political capital by exploring the outer range of its scope of representation. That is an unreal case or a distorting possibility or extreme example is, I think, the phrase commonly used in judgments. Do not measure the terms of a power by reference to distorting examples or distorting possibilities or extreme examples.
The Canberra Voice has the ability to lobby the Reserve Bank in relation to interest rates. The Canberra Voice has the ability to lobby every government department, every minister, on every issue. Cabinet papers will be contemplated by the Voice. Let's be very clear about it. That is a very significant change to our government. We don't want a Canberra Voice having a say on defence, on the RBA decisions around interest rates, on environmental approvals and outcomes, on every element of a government decision making under this proposal by Mr Albanese is going to be affected.
I think that seems a bit far-fetched, but
Facts are important, so here are the facts, because facts are important. You're damn right.
Just one observation. I know a lot of people have been agitated about the idea of the Voice making representations to the Reserve Bank or the Governor-General or the Lighthouse Keeper, etc. I just would have thought that the obvious thing that Parliament would do when it's making a law about composition, powers, procedures, etc., would actually have some law that says this is how you make a representation to the executive government. Because remembering the term in the Constitution, or the term proposed to be used, is the executive government. It isn't this particular officer or that particular office, it's the executive government. That's all that needs to be maintained, your ability to make a representation to the executive government. Parliament can say you make your representation to the executive government by sending all your representations to this particular email address or this particular office, or giving them to ministers, and you can have all sorts of ways of setting it up. So you have, in practice, you can have methods of consultation, etc. That's all up to Parliament and the legislation. So in the end, it's Parliament that will actually control how representations to executive government come into executive government and are dealt with. 129.2 simply allows representations to be made to the executive government. So long as you are still making a representation to the executive government, Parliament can say how you make that representation to the executive government. So long as it goes to the executive government, you don't have to have a right to individually send it to the Governor-General or the King or the Lighthouse Keeper or anyone else. It just has to go to the executive government, and Parliament can control that.
I think what's really clear from the wording is that this body will not be vested with any awesome legal power that will destabilise government. It will be vested only with the power to make representations. And what to me is crystal clear is that its impact will depend upon the wisdom and drafting and moral mandate behind those representations. That's it. It really is. And there's no joy for this body in litigation. It's not likely to make it influential. There's no purchase on it within the Constitution, so it will come down to those political factors as it should. And I think people just need to get a grip a bit in suggesting that there is some awesome power that simply has no purchase in the wording. It's not there. It's not reasonable by implication. And if people read the words, I think it's very clear what this body will do.
Thank you.
I would just add this. Sub 3 is not allowed to eat sub 2. That's what it means to say that it's subject to the Constitution. So you can't, under sub 3, by what I'll call pretended regulation of functions, effectively, substantially, really deprive the voice of its definitional character, which is one of making representations. Now, that is, of course, something that the High Court will ride boundary on. And if, God forbid, there were ever a parliament that thought it was clever to tie up the voice so that effectively it could not make representations, then there'll be a pretty brisk piece of High Court litigation. Ordinary life will continue, probably regardless of what's happening in Canberra, and it will be determined that either yes or no, a law under sub 3 does or does not cross that boundary. I actually don't think that's likely ever to happen, because I am very confident, notwithstanding our robust partisan politics in this country, that no parliament will ever decide that they'll try and undo the evident will of the people under section 129 if it becomes part of our constitution, and by some kind of cleverness and a very unkind approach to our Indigenous fellow citizens, deprive them of what the Constitution would give them. Now, that's the only way in which sub 3 could give rise to litigation, once only, and let's hope it would never arise. Thereafter, sub 3 does its work, and it's exactly as Anne Toomey's just said. If from time to time there's a problem, and I doubt that there will be, but if there's a problem of what I might call logistics or handling or administration or perhaps protocol, and all of you as members of Houses of Parliament are familiar with the importance of such matters to getting on with the business of government, then no doubt the Houses will combine in setting off to the Governor-General a statute under sub 3 to pull things into order. And that can be done from time to time and by adjustments, and that's good.
It ends up being litigated in the High Court for years to come. The form of words that the Prime Minister has on the table at the moment will see our system of government change dramatically from what we've known in our entire lifetime. I just think it grinds the system of government as we know it to a halt.
Facts are important, so here are the facts, because facts are important. You're damn right.
And I really do think that we need to get a grip concerning this magical process of implication, which is only a matter of teasing out the meaning of text. It might be difficult, it might be subtle, but that's why we have the High Court. It just seems to me that this notion that there is an implication threatened in the proposed subsection 2, whereby the validity of executive action, multifarious decisions, great, small and middling, by officials, great, small and middling, will be somehow jamming the courts from here to kingdom come as a result of this enactment is really too silly for words. And I personally don't think it would be responsible for any constitutionalist to say so, and I know George Williams is not saying that. He's talking about something completely different, which is if as one hopes would never happen. If there were either a House of Parliament or the Executive that refused to receive a representation, refused to receive it, the fingers in the ears, then of course there would be, as one would hope under the rule of law, a remedy available pretty peremptorily, I would have thought, in the High Court to make sure that that person or persons obeyed the Constitution. You couldn't possibly, and I do put it that absolutely, say there will be an implication that whatever the voice says will be a mandatory relevant consideration.